one of the big themes in my new book, Enlightenment Now, is how is it that we're simultaneously, in many ways, getting smarter, but also seem to be getting stupider as a society? So I think part of it is that none of us individually are that smart. We all, and cognitive psychologists have shown that humans have all kinds of biases and fallacies. We reason from stereotypes. We assess risk by how easy it is to imagine something. So we're afraid of getting on a plane because it's very easy to imagine a plane crashing, and plane crashes make the news. We don't worry about texting while driving because there's never a headline on page one of the 100 people who died in the past week because they texted while driving. So there are a lot of fallacies. But the thing is, we as a species have done some amazing things. I mean, we discovered those Mayan buried cities. I mean, science is amazing, and democracies are amazing. And it's because none of us solves a problem all by ourselves. We're part of a kind of collective brain that works by rules where all of the excesses of one person get kind of balanced out by other people. And that's why you have things like checks and balances in a democracy, where instead of having a supreme leader who just runs the country the way he wants, he's got to worry about the legislature and the courts and the judges and impeachment and so on. In science, instead of having one genius announcing the way the world works, he or she has to subject himself to peer review and let other scientists criticize him or her. And whenever you get people acting intelligently, it's often because they belong to these institutions with rules that are designed to make up for the idiocies of any individual person.
That's fascinating. I completely agree with that. That makes so much sense. I've also felt that there's not a lot. We have difficulties. Obviously, people have difficulties in this life. There's social difficulties, economic difficulties. But in terms of survival difficulties, it's way easier to get by today than it has ever been in human history. And I wonder if human beings have a need for adversity and complexity and problem solving and all these things that are less they're less present today than ever before. I think things are just almost too simple. We've made it too easy. We've nerfed the world. And in doing so, it's easier to just kind of be dull-minded and drift through and follow the herd. The herd is so big, and there's so many people in the herd. If you just do what most of the people are doing, wear what most of the people are wearing, say the things most of the people say, you'll survive. And you'll survive, and you'll find some other dim-witted person to breed with, and you'll make dim-witted children. And I'm being dead serious. I think there's a certain – when you're dealing with this massive pack of humans, 300+ million on a continent, there's so much – I've always said, like, if you have a group of people, if you're being very generous, and you have 100 people in a room, what are the odds that one of those people is a moron? It's 100% that one is going to be a moron. That leaves you with 3 million morons in the United States of America, if you're being really kind.
And 3 million geniuses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, probably. I'm an optimist. I would like to think you're dealing with probably 6 million geniuses.
Okay. My book is often described as a book on optimism and enlightenment now because I have 75 graphs, almost all of which show the world getting better, including what some people think of the most incredible graph in the book on a phenomenon called the Flynn effect, which is that, believe it or not, and I know most people do not, IQ scores have been rising for most of the last 100 years, about 3 points a decade. Now this, I know it seems totally unbelievable, but yeah, they discovered it when Flynn, a philosopher, discovered it when he realized that the people who make IQ tests had to keep renorming the tests to keep 100 as the average because the average kept creeping up. And it was like, gee, 110, well, we keep that's what most people score. We say that the average is 100, we got to adjust the scale downward. And Flynn realized, hey, wait a second, they keep doing this over and over again. That must mean the population's getting smarter. Now, not biologically smarter. It's not that people's brain power has somehow magically been increasing, although probably a little bit of that through better nutrition, better sanitation, and healthcare, and so on. But a lot of it is just that ideas that used to be kind of sophisticated and restricted to professors and scientists and statisticians kind of trickle down to the population. And so things like placebo effect or trade-off or cost-benefit analysis or win-win situation. All these things that actually came from pretty fancy schmancy theory originally, but they kind of are loosed on the whole population and they become part of everyone's conventional wisdom. Also, we have to think more and more in abstract ways just to deal with things like a subway map or a smartphone, watching TV. It used to be you'd turn on the knob and your TV would be on. Now you got to kind of program the bloody thing. So the demands of life have become more sophisticated and ideas spread more quickly. And so we are quite literally getting smarter up to a point. Things that can't go on forever don't, and the Flynn effect is starting to level off. But there has been this drift upward in intelligence.
I don't think that's surprising at all. I think if you look at the amount of information that people are subject to today and just the sheer raw data, I mean, there's a lot of the data is just nonsense and Twitter. And what is the quote that we produce more content in 2 days than in entire human history every 2 days?
Wow. Yeah,
something crazy like that. Is that right?
It sounds
something
plausible.
along those lines.
It sounds plausible. Yeah,
but most of it is like, LOL. I just went to the mall. There's a lot of nonsense in there.
Right.
But the sheer amount of interesting information, like those newly discovered Mayan ruins in Guatemala and things along those lines, or there was some interesting new information on the history of human beings because they found some new teeth and some that throw back the date of modern humans, and they keep moving that back. But the point is, we're constantly getting more information, more data, more things to think about, and I've just got to assume that the amount of information that comes to a person in 2018 is just vastly larger than the amount that came to them in 1978.
Oh, absolutely. And there are, as idiotic as a lot of public debate is today, there's a lot of idiocy in the past too.
Sure.
I mean, in the as recently as the 1960s, there's that movie on the first interracial couple in Virginia, where there was a judge who said God didn't mean for the races to intermarry. That's why he put black people in Africa and yellow people in Asia and white people in Europe.
The judge.
Hilarious. The judge said this in his decision, eventually overturned, Loving versus Virginia. Now, I mean, no one would make that stupid an argument today.
Right.
Even people that we think of as kind of racist, they'd be embarrassed. I mean, it's just too stupid. And people on the left made some pretty stupid arguments as well. When Castro sent all of the gay people to concentration camps in Cuba, you had Susan Sontag, a respected left-wing intellectual, who's saying, well, this is, you got to forgive them because Latin America was such a sexualized culture and there were prostitutes and there was decadence that, of course, it was a little bit of an overreaction. Now, today, I don't think anyone on the left or the right would say it's okay to send gay people to concentration camps because there were a lot of prostitutes in Havana. But that's the kind of idiotic statement that we kind of forget that people used to make in the past too. So it's a way of reassuring ourselves whenever we see debate seemingly getting stupider and stupider. You got to remember, there's a lot of stupidity in the past too.
Oh yeah, a massive amount.
And I think you're right that it's hard to tell day by day, especially when your attention is concentrated by the worst things that happen. And again, this is a big theme of enlightenment now, that your picture of the world, because the human mind really is driven by anecdotes and images and stories, and that's what the news gives us. But if you look at trends, if you follow the trend lines and not the headlines, you see that a lot of things really are getting better gradually, but that kind of accumulates over time. And one of the things that with the flow of information, we are actually getting more, we meaning Americans, but also worldwide, there is this trend of getting more liberal, more tolerant, more progressive. Hard to tell day by day, but when you think that in the 1960s there was a debate over whether there should be racial segregation, whether African Americans should drink out of different water fountains or stay in different motels. There was debate over whether women should be allowed in the workplace, that what's going to happen to all the kids if they're all working. Debate over whether gay people should be allowed to be teachers. And we've kind of forgotten these because the progressive side kind of won. and the debate has moved on. And that happens worldwide as information flows, as people start to meet each other, as ideas proliferate. There is this gradual trend toward more tolerance, even in parts of the world where it seems to be totally absent, like in a lot of the Islamic world, which world surveys show this is the least progressive part of the world in terms of attitudes towards women, attitudes towards gays, attitudes toward child rearing. But even in the Islamic world, there's been a drift in the liberal direction. We just saw it 2 weeks ago when Saudi Arabia allowed women to drive.
Yeah.
Now, it's kind of, modest form of progress.
Kind of hilarious.
Kind of hilarious. But
statement of progress.
But it shows. They just could not live in this absurd situation forever. The world really did drag them kicking and screaming out of the Middle Ages in this way, and that kind of tends to happen over the long run.
Yeah, I'm an optimist, and I really do look at all these trends.
You'll like the book then. 75 optimistic graphs.
Oh, excellent. I think that if you look at just the overall human race. One of the best indications of that is go and look at media representations of life from the 1950s and 1960s. Watch movies, especially from the 50s, and just see how people behaved. You're getting sort of a timestamp of human interaction from 1950. It's obviously an artistic representation of that time, but you get a sense of how people thought it was okay to behave. There was a lot of smacking women.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, really common in movies, right?
And children.
Yep.
You remember the scene where Junior would misbehave and Mom would say, "Wait till your father gets home," and then Dad comes home and he pulls the belt out of his pants so he could use it as a weapon. So the buckle would really hurt the child.
Yeah.
And the child would tie a pillow on his behind, and there'd be stars, and go off into the corner.
Yeah.
And now you'd call social services and they'd take the child away or something.
Yeah. Well, I think this idea of being dragged kicking and screaming into this new age, I think we're all doing that. And I think you're seeing that in so many different parts of our culture today. I think that's one of the things that's happening with this Me Too movement, is that all this mass public shaming of sexual harassers and sexual assaulters and all this different thing, it's like forcing human beings to reassess the way they interact with each other. And like this really radical, very quick sort of a movement over just a short period of time has had a giant impact on culture. Yeah,
and like a lot of social changes, it happens really quickly.
Yeah.
And it probably mixes some good things and some not so good things.
Right.
And it's really good that men no longer have a license to just expose themselves or harass women who work for them and treat them in these crude and ugly ways. And there's also a legitimate concern that you just can't really believe all accusers. We kind of learned that through history from witch hunts and lynchings and pogroms. And there's got to be proportionality. Not all infractions are the same. The punishment should fit the crime. So we haven't quite settled in how to balance the very necessary corrective to men harassing women with the kind of rule of law and standards of justice.
Correct me if I'm wrong about this, but this is one of my theories, is our brains, our capacity, and our understanding is relative to what's necessary at the time. And one of the things that I use is Dunbar's number. So that Dunbar's number is this idea that you could only have these intimate relationships with 150 or so people, or in terms of intimacy of understanding who they are, knowing their name, knowing things about them. But as our circle of people that we interact with grows and expands, I wonder if that's going to expand as well. When you think about the amount of information that people can hold in their brain and what people are used to knowing about, this is a radically different world in 2018 than it was in 1960. The amount of things that you were aware of in 1960, just by virtue of not having social media, the internet, Google, all these different ways that you could get information from, it's just so different. It's I don't know how many times more information you're getting, but it must be much more.
Yes.
Much more. And over an incredibly small period of time, when you think about the relative time span that human beings have been here, few 100,000 years or whatever. I wonder if we're changing And I
Yeah.
wonder what we're going to be like if this continues to grow and continues to be a part of our life. If we're going to adapt our abilities.
Well, we can't. We're not going to change the neurobiological structure of the brain, very much because, even though we all learn through our lives, there are limits as to what our brain can do. But what I think happens is there's a back and forth between our brains and the technology. So the technology adjusts to take into account how our brains work. So the restriction of you can't know or feel that you know more than 100 or 150 people, I mean, kind of that's helps define the set of top ranked friends in a social network. The fact that we're visual creatures, we're primates. We get a lot of our information through our eyeballs. It's one of the reasons why computer technology has changed so much since the 80s and 70s. Like when I first learned to program a computer, it was just all text or use a computer. I mean, they're just 80 characters in a line, and you had the letters of the alphabet, and that's all there was. And it soon became clear that that's not a very efficient way of getting ideas into a brain. It's really laborious and tiring. And so you have graphic user interfaces. I mean, Apple was the first to commercialize it, but it had been developed beforehand at Xerox. But it was really exotic at first when you saw a screen with these windows and pointers and icons and a mouse. And computers don't work that way naturally. It took a huge amount, it still does, takes a huge amount of programming to get a computer to pretend that there's a sheet of paper up on the screen. But because we're visual creatures, the technology adapted so that we could feel comfortable using it. So some of it is how much do we adjust to the technology and how much is the technology forced to adjust to us?
I'm thinking in terms of the actual capability of the human mind. And when you read about modern human brains, like there was an article that was published recently that was trying to remap the timeline of the modern human brain. And I think they were pointing to about 35,000 years ago now. And see if you can find that. Trying to figure out what exactly they were saying. But essentially they were saying that the modern human brain was far more recent.
How interesting. I mean, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Well,
I would have guessed a little bit older than that, but yeah. But in the tens of thousands of years, yeah.
So with one of the big mysteries, right, is the doubling of the human brain size over a period of what it was like 2 million years. Something had to happen to cause that, like some change in our environment, some change in our behavior, and our. What has been a bigger change than the internet? Like, what has been a bigger change than the access to information that people have today? And I'm wondering if, like, we're not experiencing, when you're talking about these steady rise of IQs, obviously it's not just the internet, it's education, the cumulative data that people just keep piling onto, and more people learn more things, and people get wiser, and the way we interface with information is better than it's ever been before. But I wonder about the capacity and the capabilities of the human mind. If it's happening right now, it's just a very gradual thing, this 10% tick or 10-point tick per decade. If this is going to lead, you extrapolate, you go 100 years from now, 200 years from now, I mean, what are we going to be looking at?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, the thing is that what happened over the last few tens of thousands of years is not going to be replicated anytime soon because that a lot was driven by Darwinian natural selection, which just meant that smarter people had more surviving babies. That's a process that happened as a speed limit measured in generations. And it may not be that coping in a modern society makes you have more babies. It might be the other way around.
Right.
As you're more educated, you have fewer children. And so I think a lot of there's going to be a certain amount of plasticity of what you can master in your own lifetime, especially if you start in childhood. A lot of these skills become second nature, how to look things up, how to use these devices efficiently. And then that can reach limits. There are only so many hours in the day, and there's only so many neurons in your brain. But in conjunction with that, the technology becomes more human-friendly, and there are new ways of getting information into the brain. As I mentioned, we've gone from just lines of characters to graphic user interfaces and video and more like creative data graphics, where you see moving colored graphs as a way of getting a bunch of variables into a human head more efficiently. And virtual reality might be the next step, where we've got 3D environments that we can explore. And that may be a way of getting our puny brains to experience more information.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up to you next, because that's one of the things that concerns me the most, is how good virtual reality is now, but how relatively crude it is in comparison to the potential.